the U.S. plans to deploy a new special operations force to Iraq to step up the fight against Islamic militants. Will this be enough? Some on Capitol Hill, including Senator John McCain, say no. We'll talk about that with retired U.S. Army General Wesley Clark, the former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. Coming up first, joining me from Capitol Hill, Representative Mark Pocan, Democrat of Wisconsin. He's senior whip for the Democratic caucus, a member of the House Budget Committee, the House Education and the Workforce Committee. He also served on the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform during the initial Benghazi investigation. Congressman, thanks for joining us. On Tuesday, Defense Secretary Ash Carter announced the deployment of a new group of Special Operations Forces to Iraq to step up the fight. What's your read?
Well, you know, a lot of us are concerned. We want to make sure Congress has its say as well. This has been a region where we don't have the best track record. We all know that we've got to deal with ISIS and we need to bring in some partners around that. But every time we get involved and we take largely a leadership role in this region, we haven't had the best results. And I think Congress has asked to have a reauthorization of our ability to have say as we send troops in. And it's something we're looking for.
Senator McCain says that this approach is only incremental and that he wants more boots on the ground. He wants to pick it up sooner.
Yeah, the problem is boots on the ground have humans attached to them, and that's why it's a tough decision and why Congress has to have a say. You know, one of the things that as we look at dealing with this region, specifically dealing with this region in ISIS, we need to talk to people who you may not always be talking to, countries like Russia and Iran, who have common interests. We need to build a coalition not only with those countries, but countries definitely in the region who can take a leadership role on this. I think that's what we need to be doing, not just repeating the same actions that we've done in the past that quite honestly have brought us to the current conditions we have.
All of our operations in this is based on what we gave President Bush after 9/11. Do we need a new authorization of war from Congress?
Absolutely. You know, we've been asking for that. We would like to have that. It is so loose right now, the one that's out there, that any president, this president or a future president, can use it for virtually anything in how they've been interpreting it. And I think we have to get back to the point that Congress has a say. We're the closest elected to our constituents. We hear from people who don't want to see us get involved in more interventions. And I think you need to have Congress's ability to have that heard, and we need to have a new reauthorization that would allow that to happen.
What's preventing it from coming to the floor?
Well, unfortunately, we can't get anything really to the floor until very recently. We're having a few things happen right now, but it's just been difficult because I don't know if there's consensus even among the Republicans within their party on what that reauthorization would look like. But bottom line is, it's in everyone's interest, Democrat, Republican, Independent, that Congress has a say and doesn't leave it entirely to one branch of government, to one individual to make these decisions.
How would you vote?
Well, I would vote for a new reauthorization, but we have to see what it's going to say. It's not just the exact same language. Clearly, it's way too loose. But we would want to have a very specific authorization that would say whether or not you'd have us involved. Right now, I think many of us, myself included, don't think that more troops on the ground is the answer. Therefore, we may be reluctant depending on the language. But we do think that we need to have partners, especially in that region, to work with on this.
All right, we'll cover some other bases. Obama yesterday expressed confidence that the world's nations will soon strike a global climate change agreement, including legally binding targets designed to forge a low-carbon global economy in the century ahead. Opposition's coming from Congress. Where do you stand?
I'm part of the Safe Climate Caucus. I think that we have to do far more than we've been doing, and I've been very heartened to see both not only President Obama, but also the leader of China when they had the accord a few months ago, now to have this in Paris. We need to put this at a front burner, not a back burner. We need to make sure that for future generations we're addressing this now, and the more we can not rely on fossil fuels, not only is good for the environment, but it's going to be good for the last conversation we just had about this situation in the Middle East. So there's a lot of benefits to having serious dialogue about climate change.
How can people be against this?
You know, that's a good question, Larry. I ask that of myself every day. When I look at members of the Science Committee, that this is largely under their jurisdiction, most of them don't seem to believe entirely in science, and the scientists say we've got a global warming to deal with, and unfortunately, they continue to ignore it. I think a lot of that has to do with certain industries, oil and other industries that are big financiers of campaigns, get heard really loud in Washington, and that's against what's in the best interest of the people of this country. So people like myself have to keep talking about this, and we're really heartened to see what the president did.
Wisconsin is a state involved in world trade. What do you think of the administration's Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement?
Well, unfortunately, and I've spent a lot of time on this, I think it's going to cost us more jobs that'll go overseas, and it's going to flatten our wages here. It's just so many problems, Larry. I could go on and on about it, but the bottom line is it costs jobs in the manufacturing and service sectors, and we'll see our wages depressed here. When you compete with Vietnam, where the minimum wage is pocket change an hour, you just can't compete. And I just strongly disagree with the White House on this one, and I'm hoping that we can defeat it on the floor of Congress, I think, with a bipartisan vote.
Hillary first agreed with it, now disagrees with it, right?
Well, I don't know if she ever agreed with it. She agreed with the concept of where it could go, but the final language, Hillary Clinton has looked at and said, no, this is not acceptable. Same reasons, it's going to cost jobs and make our wages not increase here, and we have had wages far too long, been very flat. So I think she's been very clear on it, and I understand where she's at, and I'm hoping that if we don't get it done this year and we have a new president, and if that president's Hillary Clinton, that this conversation's off the table.
You recently introduced the Workplace Democracy Act along with Senator Sanders. In essence, what does that say?
You know, that's just trying to make it easier for workers to have a voice in their workplaces. You know, we've seen attacks, especially in my home state of Wisconsin. We recently became a right-to-work state. In 2010, when I was in the state legislature, we banned collective bargaining for public employees, and we've watched the downward spiral that's had on wages. And we think it should be enough that if a majority of workers want to form a union, they have to have the process in place. Currently, the rules kind of rig it for the big companies to extend the process and extend it with all these artificial deadlines. We want to have a real process in place that if the workers vote that they want to have a collective voice in their workplaces for their working conditions and for their pay, they should be able to do that. And that's a short and sum of what is part of that bill.
Are you endorsing Secretary of State Clinton?
I haven't endorsed anyone. I'm the first vice chair of the Progressive Caucus, and one of the things we've been doing is talking to all the campaigns about taking in progressive policy, raising the minimum wage, a debt-free college proposal so that anyone can go to college and not have to leave with a mountain of debt, and other issues. And so far, we've been very successful. So I'm going to keep doing that, and ultimately, I'm going to back whoever the Democrat is, but right now, my job is to get as progressive policies as possible out of all of our presidential candidates.
Mark, thank you so much. We hope to have you on a lot.
Absolutely, Larry. Thank you so much.
That was Mark Pocan, Congressman from Wisconsin. We thank him for joining us today. He's a Democrat of Wisconsin, and he serves on the House Budget Committee and the House Education Committee and the Workforce Committee.